Good afternoon. My name is James Hogbin. I am the CEO of Fingerprint Supervision. And today I'm joined by Eddie Green from SnippetSentry, who are a very, very clever bit of tech for mobile messaging archiving. Eddie, why don't you introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about what SnippetSentry do?
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for the invitation. SnippetSentry is really in the business of tracking and securing mobile data. And what's different about us is we think of it as a service, not a tech-forward solution. We think it ought to be a really easy set it and forget it. You have a business to run. Your business is not compliance, and we're in the business of making sure that your mobile data is compliant. And that's really what our mission is about.
So in terms of mobile data, we're talking WhatsApp, iMessage. What else are you adept at collecting?
So today we have iMessage and WhatsApp. We are developing WeChat. That'll be out very shortly. And what's different about us is we don't require any change to user behavior. We are a native solution. You don't need a custom app. The way you use your phone today is exactly the way you'll use it when you're tracking to a compliance solution. So all it is a simple registration. It connects your phone up. And at that point, you're just back to business as usual. It just runs in the background.
And so there are other people in the marketplace that demand an app download and et cetera, you're not requiring any touch to the phone at all, right?
I really think, yeah. So as a key mission, we think that that's the wrong way to go, that we don't want to change user behavior. We're not in the app business. We're in the compliance business. Keeping up with apps and all of the technological advances that keep you competitive is a full-time occupation. And there are tons of people out there doing that. You'd be competing with the likes of WhatsApp, you'd be competing with Apple. That seems like a kind of a fruitless chase. So we have a very different philosophy. Our philosophy is you ought to be able to use the best of breed apps, things that work for you and that you're comfortable using every day. And that's a key tenet of ours. We won't release things that don't allow you to just use the phone naturally.
And so how has SnippetSentry taken that route? Because obviously there are some large market players that have effectively shimmed or skinned the underlying service app so the user wouldn't know. How did the idea come about? How did it grow? How did it become real?
So there's a huge amount. It sounds very simple to have a native solution, but it's not. You really have to get under the hood and you have to understand very thoroughly the operating system top to bottom. Not only do you have to find the surgical position that you want to inject in, you have to do it in a way that is not disruptive every time a new release comes out. And so it's a very complicated bit of technology. It sounds quite simple on the surface. It took a better part of 2 years to really investigate and understand exactly what the nuances are. Where do we sit in that stack so that as subsequent releases come out, there's no change. And we put a lot of time and effort into that, and that's really paying dividends for us. We spent a lot of time building a platform that scales from 1 seat to better than 100,000 seats. And that's been a real core tenet of ours. And we're going to continue to keep expanding the channels and the connectors as we go. But what we're interested in doing is building a service. It should be really simple to use. It should take 2 minutes to connect, and then you should just set it and forget it.
So a lot of compliance people talk to us and say, yeah, we'd like some degree of mobile device messaging supervision. And we often say to them, it's not so much to begin with a compliance issue, it's a fleet management issue, because you have a bunch of users. Sure, you want to look at all their messages, their emails, their Bloombergs, their voice calls, they're all coming through a centralized system we can gather the data off. And as we get into it's a mobile device, we need to get something on that mobile device to record it. And effectively, the SnippetSentry offering means that that doesn't have to happen, right? We don't have to go as an industry, supervision industry, to the end user phone and grab something. We can do it all without touching that end device, right?
That's right. If you have an iPhone today, and in fact, in the next 30 days, you'll be able to go to our website and try it out right on the homepage. So if you take your iPhone, all you have to do is go to the website and say, I'm ready to send a message, and you'll get it back in email within seconds. And you'll be able to see for yourself how the technology works. But it's really about that transparency. That's what we're very much focused on. And it does help a lot with the fleet management of phones. You know, if you have versioning of apps, you have a lot of problems in making sure that, you know, they're always updated, that they're interconnecting with the existing apps that people use. That's a very complicated, you know, system. That's what we're trying to avoid. It's disruptive to the user. The user just wants to use the phone. They want to communicate. They're not interested in learning a new app and trying to learn new behaviors.
Mm-hmm. And how do you deal with the cultural issues around personal devices? We find that most employees at least have a passing understanding that their emails and phone calls are being recorded. But for some reason, even though they're regulated, they have a fit of the vapors when you say, oh, we're going to look at your iMessage or WhatsApp. They deem that to be super personal, even though they're regulated, even though they're discussing business, and even though they should be supervised on that. So have you found the process of saying, well, hang on a sec, you're regulated, we need that data, which is a fairly blunt tool. Where do you find the pushback is from clients, just culturally?
I'll take you through a real world example. Our investment banker is CFG, Carolina Financial Group, out of Brevard, North Carolina. They were one of our first users. When I talked to the COO there, he said, you know, it's not a problem. I'm just going to declare a fatwa. Everybody has to use the system. You will connect your phone and you're off to the races.
How did that go?
It went just swimmingly well. I called him back 2 days later. He said there was a complete uprising of the young bucks. Nobody was going to agree to connect their phone. And that wasn't too surprising. And so now what we've got, we took a step back and said, well, that's interesting. You know, there's kind of two approaches that you could have. The first approach is you could have a private address book, and that would allow you to accept out numbers. The second approach is you could have a second phone, or you could have an eSIM, you know, one of those two. What we found is a lot of people, when they start to think about it, they get more comfortable with the idea of a second device. And the reason is, even if you accept out a message, it still gets tracked in the system. It doesn't go to the archive, but it would exist in somebody's system like ours. Now, if you get a discovery request from a government regulatory agency or a legal firm, that is still going to be extracted from the archive, from our archive, as opposed to the endpoint archive. So you really haven't accomplished the isolation that you want. And that's become apparent to a lot of the folks, particularly the more tech savvy younger employees. They understand that right away. So that gave rise to an idea that we're working on now, which is, okay, we'll lease you a phone if you want to use a second corporate device. If you're a smaller firm and you don't want to have all the hassle of you know, getting it configured and up to date, no problem. Come to our website and we'll send you a phone and be ready to go right out of the box. That's just a corporate device that you use day to day. It's early, but we've gotten tremendous feedback from people that once they kind of understand the technical issues and the legal issues around accepting out messages, they're much more comfortable with the second phone. Now that may change over time, but that's clearly what we're hearing in the marketplace today.
So just so I understand, your answer to the cultural argument around our employees won't wear it because they somehow think WhatsApp is untouchable, whereas email isn't, is to give them another phone and say, this is my business WhatsApp, this is my personal WhatsApp, and just keep the two separate on that basis.
Yeah, most of our larger clients are saying, look, we're going to do corporate devices. And the real issue comes in with the smaller firms, or the RIAs of the world. It's, you want a simple solution. You don't have big complicated IT systems in place. And so this is potentially a really easy solution. You just get a device in, it's already pre-configured, the service is already monitored, you hand it out to the employee, you're done. That you decide that the employee has left the company, or you need to upgrade, you send the phone back. That's kind of the end of it. And that turns out, once people really understand what the legal ramifications are, they're not exactly thrilled about having a second device, but that's better than discovering some of your messages did in fact end up being called in discovery.
And in terms of those compliance professionals that say, listen, the policy says it's banned, it's just easier to ban it, what would you say? Because obviously it's there, and if it's banned, people will subvert it. So how do you deal with the recidivist compliance consultants that are saying, no, not having it?
I think that's short-sighted. Look, everybody, the employee population is young. They're all used to using this technology. They grew up with it. You can't come into work and say, I'm sorry, one of the principal things that you rely on every day is really not suitable for the work environment. That doesn't work. What's going to end up happening is you're going to limit your revenue and your growth potential, and you're going to limit some of the talent you can get hired into the company. People just aren't going to be comfortable with that. So I think as a matter of long-term business strategy, you have to figure out how to get the service to work. And you have to, in the same way that when email first came out, there was a lot of growing pains and a lot of learning about what does it mean to be compliant? How do we get compliance systems in? It's going to be the same exact kind of course for the question of mobile. And I think that the people that say, I'm just going to leave it turned off, okay, I think that works for a period of time, but I think it's to the detriment of the business.
At the minute, we're seeing a large amount of fining going on from the regulator to people for WhatsApp use. Do you see that as the largest area of concern? I don't understand why they're not looking at iMessage more. Do you think that's the next wave is coming in on that, or the regulator is just using WhatsApp as a proxy for everything?
I think iMessage is coming, and I think it's not only is it iMessage, I think it's not. They started with the large firms because that's the easier opportunity. It's the quickest to clean up with the biggest impact, but they're moving down very, very quickly. They're getting down to individuals. The RAs are starting to feel the pressure as well. And so I think that over time, we're going to see that everybody is being forced to really think through their compliance component. And we think of it in 3 stages. The first stage is get the capture done, prove that you're compliant. It can be as simple as just getting it in your email box and using email search. We have that as a starting tool. The second stage is, okay, you've got that. Now you're only as good as the entire employee base, meaning everybody has to be compliant all the time. A single bad player is going to jeopardize the company and defeat what you just did. So we have spent a lot of time and a lot of money developing technology to really close off the edge cases in the same way that happened with email. And then the third stage is going to be, and I think this is more 12 to 18 months out, let's start to really look at what's going out past our firewall. So are people sending out spreadsheets with sales lists, employee rosters? What's really happening? Right.
So putting data loss prevention around the mobile.
Absolutely.
Area.
Yeah. I just think that's a longer term view. Everybody's in a short term scramble because they want to make sure they're compliant, but there's a much larger, broader strategy here in play.
And in terms of data volumes, we know that an active email user is sending, receiving about 150 emails a day. What sort of email volumes message volumes would you see for average WhatsApp users? In terms of looking at it from compliance things, you need to analyze chats and things like that. So how big is the communication move away from the email into chat?
We're just starting to get the analytics around that, but it's been surprisingly strong. When people discover that WhatsApp is now available, there's a uptick right away in data traffic, and you can see it. And so what's hard to say right now is how does that normalize out? Because everybody makes a switch the minute that the service is enabled. You get kind of an influx of heavy traffic. What we're doing is we're monitoring very carefully, what's the normalized rate as we go along. But I expect it's something in the order of 100 to 200 messages a day, kind of minimally.
Okay, because on Bloomberg we're seeing, so in terms of our actual service for the clients we've got on Bloomberg, we're probably seeing just for those clients, million and a half emails to about 12 to 18 million Bloomberg instant messages. So we're seeing sort of a 15 to 20 to 1 volume of increase in terms of data to be archived and to be processed and analyzed and stored and taken away, which is quite a lot of business flow that has remained hidden, I think.
Oh, I think so. I think it's going to explode on the scene. One of the things that we did was really made sure we went back into development and made sure that our architecture is robust and scalable. And part of that was really testing the throughput of the system in the expectation that we're going to get thousands, hundreds of thousands of messages a day. And so, we've been very careful to make sure that all of our systems are scalable and can handle that influx. I think that what we're going to see over time is a shift in the way people do business, and there will just be more and more traffic coming in over mobile as opposed to email.
And WhatsApp has many parts, obviously. It's got the messaging, but it's also got video, it's got audio, it's got group calling, it's got file sharing. How deep into the WhatsApp ecosystem does SnippetSentry go?
Today we handle just about any attachment you want to send or any SMS, any message. So we don't care if it's a GIF, we don't care if you've attached a file, we can handle all that. We are working on a voice solution now. We're thinking that through very carefully, but eventually we'll have all of that as well. But right now, we're sort of data agnostic. The goal is whatever you do on your phone and whatever you send, our system should be able to process it seamlessly.
So in terms of use cases for WhatsApp, Raj has just put a question in the comments. So where do you see WhatsApp being used? Is it primarily a sales channel? Is it a trading channel? Is it a internal control channel where the boss class is organizing meetings and documenting business decisions? Where do you see the clients that are arriving at you? Where do you see the drive for them coming on board?
There's a big demand around trading, but it's really a comprehensive record. It's kind of all of the above. I would say that trading is the thing that people are most focused on because that's where they have a lot of exposure potentially on the compliance side. But that said, they really want to have, if you're going to go through and capture all the messages, they want to have a complete corporate archive. I mean, you want to be able to go back and search and find out what the sequence was. And so it becomes very, very quickly becomes sort of pervasive within the organization.
We've seen a lot in Europe rather than on the trading side, more on the sales side. So high net worth sales for asset management or structured products, so professional investor and above, where they're on their yacht in the Med and they're using WhatsApp. And despite what the salesperson says in terms of I'm not allowed to use WhatsApp, I have to use email so it's captured, the high net worth is rather insulated from any of the consequences and carries on WhatsApping them. And if they don't accept WhatsApp, they take the business away, give it somewhere else. So certainly Europe-wise, we're seeing a lot more action in terms of the sales, but maybe that's also because the regulator is having a bit of a focus he says in inverted commas, on treating customers fairly and good outcomes, and that's all about sales. So maybe that's why we're seeing that in Europe, whereas in the US, where it's much more about the governance and the trading, there are more issues around governance and trading, perhaps.
I think so. I think
So,
in the States that's been the case. Yeah.
and in terms of the data protection and things within the States, in Europe, we have a thing called GDPR, which enshrines a number of somewhat problematic for regulated firms requirements: the right to be forgotten, the right to access data, the right to correct data, and things like that, which kind of, there is a little bit of a problem with a regulatory archive, but the regulator says they're more important. How does data protection factor in the US when it comes to these services?
It's really important. What we're finding is we get a lot of security questionnaires that come in routinely, and what people are focused on are, can you see the data? How do we know that what you're doing is just facilitating the movement of data? And there's that, and then there's, where is that? What happens to the data if an archive goes down? Are you holding it for how long? Can you do anything with that data? So we have spent a lot of time making sure that our system end to end it's a complete pass through to us. We can't examine the data. We can't manipulate the data in any way, and that's really key to the compliance piece.
And have you ever been involved with clients that have been audited and the regulator assessor has said, show us your archives?
So early on,
that's exciting that it was meant to. Show us your archives, darling.
Early on, I mentioned our investment banker, that they have already had a request come in from the regulators, and they were quite thrilled. It was very simple for them to go to their archive and just do a quick search, and they produced the relevant. I think in this case, it was some iMessage and WhatsApp. And sent that off to the regulators, and everybody was happy. It became a complete non-issue.
And when you are involved in those sort of investigations, what is the workflow, if you like, from the client? Is it typically we're looking for these messages, or it doesn't matter to you, you just give them the system, they're gathering the data out of it?
We really don't want to be in the middle of all that, and so all we're doing is passing the data off to an archive. And when a regulatory request comes in, it's direct to the customer. We're aware of it because of the relationship with the customers, just as a matter of course. But in no way are we part of that conversation, or we don't have anything to do with producing any evidence. That's entirely up to the customer.
And can you provide metrics in terms of top talkers, top networkers, who's using it more, who's using it less, as probably a leading indicator to people not being on the system when they should be, and those sort of metrics? How does your system help the compliance department to look at those sort of things?
So that's an area that we're building out. We have a couple of key features. As I said earlier, one of the big issues is, okay, I've got everybody connected, but how do I know everybody stays connected? We have a very unique technology called Keep Alive, and that Keep Alive monitors the health of those connections and then identifies and alerts the customer immediately that, look, so-and-so has either had a technical problem, or for whatever reason, they've decided to disconnect. We're really focused on that edge protection case, and really making sure that once you have the system up, it's complete end to end. So that's kind of what the focus is.
And so, if I understand that correctly, if a user stops ingesting, you would notice and highlight that and say they've either done something nefarious or something's gone wrong with their device.
That's right. It's a very comprehensive solution, and it's a unique bit of technology. It can tell you there's a system-wide outage. There's a problem with the archive because everybody's affected. It could tell you that perhaps there's something wrong within SnippetSentry. It can tell you down to individual users. But the main point is you cannot be in a position where you've missed messages. And one of the things that we've built is what we call it's a recovery system. Even if an archive goes offline for 24 hours, when it comes back online, our system can go back in and retroactively pull those messages. We want to make sure that you never lose a single message. Your record is only as good as all of the messages coming in and being sequenced properly.
Yeah, that's quite a trick to pull. But underlying, are you using one of the cloud providers, or do you roll your own architecture?
So we do host within a cloud because we're building a very robust service. But we are cloud agnostic. What we're trying to do is make it really easy for people to connect, and so it's a generalized service and what you're doing is really just creating an account and then just operating off that account. So it's a pretty simple solution. We don't do anything with iCloud at all. It's really just around our architecture and the scalability of that architecture.
So all of the data is hosted in one of the major cloud providers rather than your data centers, et cetera, et cetera. So effectively, you have access to all of the reliability that the major cloud providers provide, as opposed to a couple of engineers in a data center somewhere in downtown Reston, Virginia, to kick a server if it goes down.
Oh no, that's absolutely correct. In fact, we spend a lot of time poring over, the SLAs for Google, for Microsoft. We really want to understand, what their requirements are and what the disaster recoveries are. We're dependent on that, and we're dependent on their security. So we're constantly monitoring for best of breed of security best practices. Our business relies heavily on making sure that we don't have a breach. So we don't want to build anything custom. We don't want to have our own security protocols. We want to rely on the leading edge of the industry.
And in terms of the tech that you're building out, you've mentioned that there are some existing functions within the different channels that you're archiving off the mobile phone. Is the focus on a complete WhatsApp or a broader, we'd like to get Signal, Telegram, all the rest of it on, and then incrementally add services into each one as we go?
That's a great question. So our strategy is really pretty simple. And conceptually, we're focused on iMessage, WhatsApp, and WeChat. That's 85% of the market. We could go out, we could do Telegram and Signal and all those. It really is not a good long-term strategy. The better strategy is to focus on making WhatsApp as robust as possible and as extensible as possible. Get all the voice features, all the group features. Same thing for iMessage. It's really about making sure that it's bulletproof. And I think the race to date has been everybody saying, I've got more connectors than everybody else. I don't think that's a particularly useful metric, and I don't think it's a particularly good business strategy.
So you're looking to be the best, most comprehensive WhatsApp, because WhatsApp's got emojis and funny videos and et cetera, and doing that entire vertical stack on the archive is more important than diving into Signal, Telegram, Mastodon, X, or whatever else happens to be on the device.
Absolutely. The big thing now is really wrapping up and making sure that you don't miss messages. It's complete end to end. And the only way to do that is to focus on the core apps and make sure that you understand all the edge cases, all the typical use cases, and you're able to accommodate those really easily and seamlessly. And so that's what our focus is. We test over and over again what happens when Apple comes out with a new version. What happens when WhatsApp comes out with a new version? What are those features? How do we incorporate those features? and that's really what we're driving toward.
And in a very UK centric thing, we're going through an inquiry into COVID, and it seems that our government is being governed by WhatsApp messages, and they've all been entered into the inquiry, and we've seen what the Prime Minister said and the Health Secretary said, etc., over COVID. The Cabinet Secretary, who's the most important civil servant in the land, was using disappearing WhatsApps. So the WhatsApps that only live for 5 minutes after you've looked at them or whatever. I'd have to ask my daughter about how the detail of these things work, because I don't know. But there are disappearing messages. How does an archiver deal with disappearing messages? Obviously, you need to capture them, but is the act of capturing them setting the timer on the decay so the user never gets to see them? How have you dealt with those sort of things?
I'm going to speak specifically about iMessage at the moment. I'm not quite as familiar with what's happened with this particular question, but in the case of iMessage, even though those messages have been deleted, they still exist. They're a phantom in the database. And so we do capture those, and they continue to be part of the record. Even though they were deleted, you can note that they were deleted. You can see they were deleted, but they're still part of the record. And I know we're investigating the same thing under WhatsApp, but I can't tell you just right now where we are in that process.
Okay, because if I were a sneaky trader, I would be sending all of my messages point-to-point encrypted with the other end and disappearing so that there was no trace of them.
Oh,
obviously, the archive is important to capture those without accidentally triggering the "I've seen it, therefore it's disappeared before you've got it."
Yeah. I mean, this is the same process that happened in email early on. There were all these edge cases, and so I as I said, like with step one, you've got the capture. That's not sufficient. Now you really have to make sure that you understand all of the user behaviors, all of the potential pitfalls, because a single breach exposes the whole company. And that's the thing that has to, that's clear to compliance people. And it's probably the number one question we get. How do you handle this case? How do we know that somebody going off for the weekend and logging out of iMessage and coming back on Monday? How do we know they did it? Those are the kinds of things that we're focused on. And we've made huge technological strides, and we've got a number of really interesting new technological avenues that we're pursuing. And our goal is to close all those out as quickly as possible.
And do you capture text messages from phones as well, or is it just WhatsApp?
No, we do text messages. So we'll do SMS, we'll do iMessage, we'll do WhatsApp. Now we're pretty agnostic about all of that.
Okay, so we'll also grab text. So if iMessage switches into text mode, you'll be grabbing those messages as well.
That's right. Yeah. That's key. That's another one of those edge cases where you got to make sure that just because iMessage, the service wasn't there, it's still a valid message. It's still part of the corporate record.
And so for SnippetSentry, but where does the future go? Because obviously there is a business in running archiving for a certain type of message strategy. A lot of the providers that have done that have been bought out by either larger archivers or by private equity type things. Where do you feel the next few years will take that journey for you?
We have a really interesting broad strategy, and we are really moving toward a very generic service. And we think that the finance market right now is a market that's under demand from regulators. There's huge pressure to get a solution out there. But if you start to think about, if you have a service where it's really easy to connect your phone, why couldn't you go after Salesforce, HubSpot? Those should be easy services to configure. And so what we're building is a service that's just a simple interconnect, a couple of questions when you log in, and you're up and running in a few minutes. And so what we want to do is fully automate the provisioning and make it seamless and make it almost instantaneous. And we think that opens up tremendous business opportunities that are well outside of the finance arena, but are nonetheless really compelling.
So does that drive you into the arms of Office 365 connectors and that sort of thing? Or are you looking more at just its email, therefore we can put in there? Because if you look into the connector store within Microsoft Office 365 / Outlook Exchange, sorry, there's a whole load of plugins for various different types of traffic, be it Bloomberg or Slack or whatever. And the companies that are there are offering it direct, but also as an integrated plugin to either Office. Google have the same thing for their G Suite, where people are doing plugins. Is that a strategic direction, or are you standing alone and just feeding the email into the archive?
No, that's very much part of our strategic direction. It's Microsoft is right at the top of our list. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to provide I want to call it a seamless connection, and what ought to happen is if you take something like Slack, that's great. There's a bunch of things that you can do. You could, for example, if you want to connect to Slack, you can do it from iMessage. You can do it from WhatsApp. There's all sorts of interconnectivity that becomes possible once you have a really robust a system where there's no change to user behavior. Now, all of a sudden, you can do a lot of transformations that the world hasn't really focused on yet. And we think there's a huge opportunity there. We've talked to a lot of customers, and we kind of explain what it is we have in mind. They get it right away and get very interested, and they've given us a lot of really great feedback.
And in terms of arriving at a customer's door, we find when we're doing our sales, either the prospect understands automation and it's, they get it, or absolutely don't understand it, and we may as well exit stage left and come back to them in a year's time. How do you find it within WhatsApp? Because I guess there's great excitement to begin with, and then but we've got this policy and we've got these people. How do the relationships happen for you?
I don't really think about it in terms of WhatsApp. What I think about it in terms of is, what's the size of the organization? What kind of resources do you have? So let's take an RIA, for example. You might be 2 or 3 people in an office. You probably have outsourced your compliance. You probably have a consulting arrangement with an IT group, but you don't have that expertise in house. You don't need it. You just want to have a business that you're focused on. That's what we're really trying to do. Is we're trying to build a really simple service where you don't have to go understand all the compliance regulatory issues. You don't have to engage consultants. You go to the website and you connect it, and you're done. Now, there's that same exact process works even when you get to an enterprise level. It's just a question of the bundling and the different features you want. So, for example, if you're a mid-sized firm, 100 to 500 seats, let's say, you may very well decide you want federated login, or you want single sign-on, right? Mm-hmm. Those are features that we have that you can configure with a press of a button. Now you've streamlined the onboarding for everybody. You have to bring 500 people on. That can be done in just a couple of minutes. And so we're trying to extend the simplicity of a single user all the way through hundreds and up to thousands of users. It ought to be really simple. IT should not be in the business of doing heavy lift to make all this happen.
Mm-hmm. And part of the supervision framework that we offer as part of Fingerprint and compliance officers often look like is the context of an individual message. So we, wherever possible, try to reconstruct the message. They said, publish to the group, individual private chat, back into the chat, and lay it all out so that if anything's found, you can go back and have a look at the conversation. have you managed to coerce threading and things like that onto the different channels that you're looking at?
It really is archive dependent. Depending on where you want it, what repository you're using, you have to be able to kind of sequence and give them the prescribed threading. And we're very careful about analyzing each of the archives and developing as much capability as the archive will support. We have what we call a common message format. That's the format that's routed through our system. It contains a lot of metadata. We're very capable of structuring and putting everything through as a threaded message. Some of those archives, most of the archives can support it, but not all. And so it's one of those things where we will provide as much functionality as the archive will permit.
And how are you dealing with the disclaimer issue? Because effectively across Europe and in America, there is a disclaimer that's required for any recorded conversation and for any regulatory conversation. So in the UK specifically, a company has to put they're authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority at some point within every single conversation they have. And that's regardless of whether it's Teams, online, in an email, on the phone, wherever it happens to be. Do you deal with any of the disclaimer bits and pieces within the channels that you deal with?
No, we're more of a pass through. The thing that we do have of the disclaimer is when you sign up on our site, you're giving express permission to connect the phone and then track the messages. And
okay, so you don't inject a disclaimer in as part of the first.
Yes, yeah, there is a disclaimer as part of that sign up process saying you're expressly giving us permission to do that. So everything is permission.
Just so I understand it, I'm on SnippetSentry as a sales guy selling you a financial product. If I make your acquaintance using WhatsApp, something attaches to say this call's been recorded by SnippetSentry.
Well, what I'm saying is when you first connect up WhatsApp, and you're giving permission to track that, there's a disclaimer for that, right?
Yeah, but conversations are two ways, right? So I may give permission to have my end recorded, but unless the other they haven't given their permission to have their conversations recorded. So how does the system deal with the sort of B end of the conversation and the permission required to record all of their data?
We're developing our voice solution, so all of that is yet to be determined. But as far as like texting and SMS, there's no disclaimer necessary for that. So we are thinking through all the issues. It varies country to country, and so we're starting to really think about exactly how that's going to work. But we're very careful to be fully compliant across the board. So we don't want to rush anything to market that doesn't meet all of the requirements.
Okay. Certainly it's the FCA's only technical rule, which is a real clincher, is the fact that there needs to be this disclaimer on all written communication. But it can be inserted in a number of different ways and possibly should be in the footer of everybody's communications anyway. So,
for example,
sorry,
just real quick, as an example, there's absolutely no reason that once you've connected, we can't send you a disclaimer back in text message or an iMessage, and we have that full communication. So what we're looking at right now is understanding the rules and understanding the best way to do that. We want to be compliant, but we don't want to be intrusive.
Yes, absolutely. And the worst thing is a vendor that spaffs a whole lot of stuff into the messages, because in the old days, messages were expensive, which I guess is why WhatsApp turned up, because putting a disclaimer in a text message is a expensive and costly thing so to do. In terms of where you're building out partnerships, obviously we have a partnership for doing supervision. Where else are you seeing activities, who's wanting to partner with you, why are they wanting to partner with you, how's that area of the business coming along for you?
Where we're seeing a lot of demand is particularly in what we're going to call natural language processing, the ability to make intelligent decisions and have an augmented conversation. So, for example, being able to do trades and being able to actually format and put those trades into a system and log them, having just extracted them from a text message. Those are the kinds of things that customers are getting very excited about and have a lot of ideas. We've got kind of a seawall of opportunity come in, and we're kind of sorting all that out right now.
And do you think that natural language processing would actually work in a chat framework? Because as I understand natural language process, just as a thought experiment, right? Natural language processing is really good at large tracts of data, and I'm not sure how it goes. I think maybe an input to an LLM may be the way forward for chat data.
Well, let's take an example of a commodities trade. You may very well agree over WhatsApp, for example, that you're buying 2 tons of iron ore. Where the natural language processing comes in, it's another module that sits on our system that says, yeah, I want to be able to do order tracking. And so it goes in and it looks at that and says, yep, yeah, I understand you're buying iron ore. Here's what the agreed price is. And it's sending that off to the order entry system. It's that kind of capability that allows you, it's much like integrating into Salesforce. It keeps track of what's happening so you don't lose leads, you don't lose productivity. That's where we're heading. That's our next big hurdle that we're focused on right now.
So I remember back in the early 2000s, I was helping out the ITers and interdealer broker, and the communication there was all AOL Messenger. And it was all about how many AOL Messenger windows you could have open, because that's how the broker market worked. Before ICE and ICE Chat turned up. And there was a very clever bit of tech there that turned an AOL message into a fix order. So you can actually use AOL not only to negotiate your price and arrange your contract, but then you could pass it through to your execution desk or execution partner over AOL into their automated system. So it strikes me that all we've done now is made that slightly more complicated with some natural language processing. Back from the day when some brokers with 2 fingers would tap away at a huge AOL system. But that, I guess, is technology. Client server has just brought us back to mainframes, isn't it? So
yeah, but a lot of things, a lot of business done on the road. And so what you don't want to do is you don't want to have to call somebody and say, hey, I need an order entry for this, that, the other. You want to have the confidence that you're out. You just, as long as you're following a generalized lexicon, you're safe in the knowledge it's going to show up in the order entry system. It's not getting lost. It cuts down on the workload tremendously. It cuts down on lost opportunities, and it lets you focus on building revenue.
And so as you're expanding out, your initial, I guess, coerced market is finance, because there's a regulator that says you should be recording all of this stuff, and they issue some fairly hefty fines to those that don't. Where do you see the next ones? Well, we're seeing sales as a generic thing for basic cultural issues. So are people using appropriate sales language? Are they not using coercive tactics? They're not using illegal or fattening language, etc., etc., etc. Where do you see WhatsApp taking you as a broad client demographic?
I think sales is something we're really looking at very heavily. But the other big one that comes to mind is medical. We've had a number of intriguing conversations with people saying, okay, the patients want to communicate with their phone the way they're used to communicate. They don't want a custom app. We've seen hospitals that have built custom apps, and not surprisingly, the doctors don't like it, and the patients certainly don't like it. So what we want to do is start to build in intelligence. And again, some of this comes back to the natural language processing. It's okay if you're authorizing prescriptions, where does that go? Does it show up in the EMR? And what kind of things can you do with that? Can you look for contradictions, drug problems of drugs that don't play well together? Those are all the possibilities that we've been talking to various medical institutions about, and it's got real promise.
Mm-hmm. And where do you see the biggest threat to the whole mobile messaging market? Because 5 years ago, 8 years ago, wasn't even there. Right now, it's enormous. Where do you think, if anywhere, there's a threat coming to this, or does it just become a thing and it's always there?
Yeah, that's where I keep coming back to this service. It should just be a set it and forget it. I mean, right now, and it was like this in the early days of email. Everybody is thinking about it as technology. I got to buy some technology and I got to insert it. And it's now gotten to the point where you're really not doing that anymore. You're just subscribing to an archiving system and a service, and away it goes. It's the same exact course. That's where we believe it's going in mobile data. And that's really what we're focused on, is making sure that it's simple, and you don't have to think about it. You don't have to have a big sophisticated organization. This is just it's a fact of life. Cell phones are ubiquitous. They're here to stay. The workforce is young, and they're not going to deal with it any other way. And so it's just one of those things where you recognize that, and you just build a system that can handle all of that, and it's very safe and secure.
And so we've got sort of five or 6 minutes left. Raj K asked a question about use cases and how things fit together. Obviously, we're on this LinkedIn Live because we're working together, and we provide supervision and you provide access to a tsunami of data from people's mobile devices. So obviously there are point solutions that effectively supervise content. You were alluding earlier to some natural language processing and also some DLP, data loss prevention type applications that are going on. The subsidiary point about auditing and lawmakers, I guess, two different things, right? So we provide a full audit trail of activities supervised, how they've been supervised, what the compliance person has done within that supervision, where they've looked, and all of that sort of stuff. Whereas on your side, your legal, decent, honest, and true, we captured everything and passed it through to the archive, to the analysis system, and we made a few metrics and reports on the way to attest that everything's good and proper. Is that a good understanding of where you see it?
That's a good understanding of today, because that's the immediate need. But one of the things that we're doing is what we call the observation and the engagement. And that's one of the reasons we're really excited about working with Fingerprint is, we have an API that allows you to do packet inspection. And we're not in the business of developing the AI solutions to know, what's an appropriate packet and not. We want to be able to hand that off to Fingerprint. Fingerprint analyzes it and can signal back into our system saying, go ahead and shut this user down. There's something wrong. Until compliance reviews it, they're offline. That's really where we want to go. And again, it comes back to, you really have to think through, if you're going to put one of these systems in, you got to think through all the corner cases. So if somebody is perpetually, sending messages that are inappropriate and going to get problems, what do? Well, you go to the MDM and you shut that system down. And that's why, we're really excited about working with you folks, because it's that early detection. It's catch small problems before they become big problems.
Absolutely. And for our clients, that's what we do. We scan the data for meaning. We scan the metadata for the interesting one in chats that we do a lot of scanning for is changing of language. Mm-hmm. So changing of language in a financial chat is a leading indicator of something that isn't quite right. And that actually makes things from of no interest whatsoever to quite a high interest to compliance people, which is interesting. The other analytic that we find in chats is top talkers. When you get somebody that isn't a top talker joining in, again, that makes the conversation a little bit more interesting from a compliance perspective. And finally, we find in terms of analysis that people are very, very unguarded in their use of instant message type channels as opposed to email or phone, which I guess shows the immaturity of the channels as business communication tools as opposed to personal communication tools, and how people have got used to the fact that there is a certain comportment that's required in email communications, voice communications, even to a lesser extent, Slack and Teams communications, that just isn't a thing when it comes to iMessage or WhatsApp and pardon me, those mobile things. Just a question of interest. How do you deal with emojis? Do you translate them back to text, or do you pass on the emoji as natural?
They come across as natural. That's part of our no change to user behavior. I mean, you shouldn't have to interpret what happened in that email message. You want to see an emoji, it should be right there. Or excuse me, text message. We don't. That's precisely the things that we're focused on. Early on, there was a lot of really kludgy things that went into email systems. All sorts of disclaimers got inserted. There were translations being done of all the headers. And all of that now is largely been dealt with, and it's pretty seamless. But it didn't start that way. But our goal right out of the chute is, everything that you see on your phone, you should be able to see when it's in the corporate record as it was presented.
I think we've lost Eddie. I've just
yeah. You there?
Sorry about that. I seem to have completely lost my communication. Not quite sure what happened there. Internet gremlins. Anyway, Eddie, it's sort of coming up on the hour, so I'd like to thank you. It's been incredibly informative about how and why mobile instant messaging and the big ones, iMessage, WeChat, WhatsApp, can all be grabbed, unprocessed, and archived securely without any form of phone interaction, which is pretty exciting from a compliance perspective. Is there any final messages you'd like to?
No, I really appreciate you taking the time, and we're very excited about working with Fingerprint. I think we're gonna be able to do a lot of really interesting things going forward, and being out in front of problems before they become really big problems.
I certainly hope so. Well, Eddie, thank you very much indeed for your time, and join us again soon for another compliance catch-up episode. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.